ኢትዮ ፊደል የዩቲዩብ ቻናል ተከታታዮች ዛሬ የምንገኘው አንድ ወደ ስፕራይን አካባቢ የተዘጋጀ በእኛ ኮሚኒቲ አካባቢ ያለን የአእምሮ ጤና ሁኔታ የምንነጋገርበት መድረክ ተዘጋጅቷል። አዘጋጆቹ ኢትዮካን ብሪጅ ዘ ጋፕ ኦን ሜንታል ሄልዝ ድርጅት ነው። የዛ ድርጅት ደግሞ ዋና በኮሚኒቲያችን የተለያዩ እነዚህ መድረኮችን በማዘጋጀት እንድንነጋገር በተለይ ከባድ የሆነውን የአእምሮ ጤና ችግር አውጥተን እንድንነጋገር ብዙ መድረኮችን ያዘጋጀችልን ጸደይ አጠገብ ትገኛለች።
የኛ ማህበረሰብ ትንሽ ወደኋላ እንላለን። ፊት ለፊት ወጣ ብለን መነጋገር አንፈልግም፣ ስፔሻሊ ስለ አእምሮ ጤንነት ሲባል እና ያው አንዳንድ ጊዜ ደግሞ ቦታ ስታዘጋጅለት ነው ሰው የሚመጣው እና እሱን በማለት ነበር የጀመርነው። ወደ 2 ዓመት አካባቢ ቀስ በቀስ እያደገ መጥቷል። ብዙ ቮለንቲሮችን ሪክሩት እያደረግን ነው እና the idea is to find a solution። እንዴት ነው ለኛ የሚሰራ ሲስተም ክሬት የምናደርገው? እሱን ደግሞ ማድረግ የምንችለው ስንነጋገርበት ነው እና እሱን በማለት ነው። thank you
publications in the mental health, community health. And what really impressed us was not really his academic work, but his willingness to sit down and spend time with us and share his experiences, to say, you know what, this is what we tried. You know, he's an active leader in the community. He's served the community for many years. And this is what worked and this is what didn't. So you guys are trying to tackle something that others have tried. So here's a wisdom. Here's a word of advice. So that's really what impressed us. For him to take the time out to say, here's my experience. And that is really the concept of Sankofa. These are old concepts, but very applicable even today. Now, before I invite Minister Tobol to come up here and present an award to Dr. Haile, I wanted to say a little bit about Dr. Haile's background, unless Minister, you're okay, good. So most of Dr. Haile's career was spent as an epidemiologist. He had clinical training back home. He was chief medical administrator as well as the chief medical officer of health in Jimma back home. But when he came here, he attended McGill University and obtained his PhD in epidemiology. That was his passion. That's how he felt he could contribute to change in society, change policy. He also received a Master of Public Health from Tulane University in the US, and originally graduated from Haile Selassie University in Ethiopia in clinical medicine. Most of his latter career was spent at Center for Addiction and Mental Health, which is right here in Toronto. He's a leader in the community-based mental health research and social and cultural determinants of mental health, with a focus on utilization of health services by Canadian immigrants. His work, I would consider it to be seminal. It really captured what it is that new immigrants to Canada face. He actually put numbers on it. He drew the correlations that are needed for people to make policy changes. Now, this is the kind of foundation that we're hoping to capitalize on as we go forward. Now, I want to say thank you to Dr. Haile for your exemplary work and leadership. I now call upon his honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Michael Tobol, to present the award.
I have to say, though, that I may have to speak to Dr. Samir afterwards. He might have to give me a little bit of help because I discovered something else today that I didn't know. So when I was younger, I discovered that the Italians, my background is Italian, so my parents were Italian and I was born in Canada. But I discovered that spaghetti, noodles, were not Italian, so we took them from the Chinese. I discovered that pizza is not Italian, we took it from the Jews. And tomatoes, of course, I thought tomato sauce, tomato paste, something that's central to our cuisine. It was something that was Italian. Well, I found out that Columbus brought the seeds back from the indigenous people in North America and Central America and South America. Today, I found out that coffee is not Italian. And it comes from cafe, which is Ethiopia. So I'm having an identity crisis right now because I don't know what I am anymore. I'm really honored to be here today. And I was, before coming to politics, I ran in a therapeutic community for men with addictions. And part of the work that I also did, I practiced law, but one of the things I discovered early on is that the only way to help someone is to understand his culture, his or her culture. The only way we're going to have an impactful therapeutic relationship, an alliance with the person, is to understand where they come from, who they are. And one of the things that you discover very quickly is that if you're not from the Black community, trying to build that therapeutic alliance is very difficult. And that's true, not just for the Black community, but for the South Asian community and many other communities. And the other thing that shocked me, because as part of my career, part of my learning, I'm doing my doctorate in clinical psychology right now as we speak. And one of the things that you discover as well is that in giving therapy, if you don't understand the culture, if you don't understand the background, you're not going to be able to help that individual. And people aren't the same. It doesn't matter where you come from in the world. We are all one people, but our cultures are different, and they've influenced us differently. So your community comes from a very collectivist style worldview. That's the same for the Italians, which means it's not about me, it's about my family. It's not about me and my family, it's about our community. And so it's very difficult to give people the supports they need when you don't understand those concepts. And of course, where was psychology discovered? Where was it developed? Where did it grow? And where most of the studies come from in the past? The United States, Canada, and England, which are individualist societies, which means it's centered on the person. So we're starting with a premise that's already wrong when we're dealing with collectivist societies. So to hear that there's a psychiatrist that's coming forward, to hear, Dr. Fenta, the work that you're doing, and I have to spend more time talking to you because your work is critical to the work that I'm trying to do. As Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, what I look to do is to create what are called continuums of care. What that means is that I need to look for places where we can get people engaged. So a low barrier mechanism that allows us to allow people to enter into and seek help when they need it. And of course, if you come from a community and you come to a guy that looks like me, and I'm not from your community, it's gonna be very hard to build that bridge. So organizations like the one that we're here today to celebrate, and the individual that we're here to celebrate, are making a tremendous impact on helping build a continuum of care that's focused on the individual, that's client-centered, not one size fits all, because we all know one size fits all does not work, especially when it comes to people's mental health and addictions. The community, like all communities, has issues. And I'm very proud to be here to speak to you today and hear the things that are happening, because I know that this is a step forward in the right direction. We have built the Roadmap to Wellness, which is a document that I worked on in 2019. It was published 2020, March 4th, and I was at a psychiatric, one of our hospitals, announcing it exactly today in 2020. And of course, you know what's happened today, right? We declared COVID-19 a pandemic. And the announcement on the day 2 weeks before, no one was really talking about mental health, because again, we have a tendency, because of the collectivist worldview that most of us have, and the stigma that's created as a result of that, to not want to talk about mental health. And so of course, all the questions that day were, is COVID really going to be a problem? Are we really going to have to close everything down? How are you going to, so all the questions related to that, of course, I'm standing there that has an eating disorders, but that's changing too, because we're starting to see men now, or young boys. It doesn't happen, a week doesn't go by that I don't hear about someone contemplating suicide. So our society is becoming much more complex. I have to say social media has played a huge part in creating some of these problems. And to the parents, be very, very careful with your children and when they're using social media. We're now at the point that 1/3 of the kids are spending 5 hours a day on social media. Now stop and think about that for a second. They're in school for 5 to 6 hours, and they're spending 5 hours on social media. When are they taking the time to do the things like what I saw today, learning how to spin cotton or wool? I'm not sure what it was, but learning tradition, listening to traditional music, speaking the traditional language. And I have to say that as part of the work that I did before coming to politics, I would always say that if you want your community to survive, if you want to keep alive the spirit of your community and instill it in your children, live it, live it. Like today, have your kids participate. If you want to make sure that they don't have a void in their lives, make sure you fill it with positive things, because positive things, as much as they'll complain about them, and they're hard, remember what happens. If you create a void, something's going to fill it. And what usually fills those voids are not good things, they're bad things. So keep them busy, because I'll tell you, these traditions that you have, that you're sharing with your children today, are the traditions that I shared, even though we didn't get the raw materials from Italy. But, making tomato sauce, being part of the process that we use, we make a lot of different types of products that are cured. Doing those types of things, it's not about the process of what you're doing, it's a time you're spending with your kids. It's a time that you're sharing knowledge. Those are the things that will build the strength and resiliency that the kids need, that when they're confronted with something negative, they'll have something to fall back on. And that's extremely important. And I think it's appropriate that today we're honoring someone who's dedicated his life to these very things and the importance of culture and tradition. And I'm so happy to be here on behalf of the province of Ontario, on behalf of the Premier of the province of Ontario, on behalf of our entire caucus, to say thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for bringing forward the important work that you're doing to help your community, because healing comes from inside, but you need you need guidance, you need to have the ability to have people around you that can support you. So thank you again for what you do for the community, for continuing to be an advocate, inspiring the new generations. I'm so happy to hear that we have a psychologist, that we have a psychiatrist in training. These are things that make me really happy and make me feel that, yes, we have a future to help everyone in a focused way that's culturally safe and appropriate for the culture that they come from. So again, thank you very much. If you would like to come up.
I just want to give an opportunity to MPP Vijay to say a few words as well. Thanks so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so honored to join Minister Tibolo at this particular event to celebrate Dr. Haley. And it is a great honor in my life to do this, and thanks Liban for the kind invitation. As Minister Tibolo was talking about this, when I walked into this event, I saw how all the community members gathered around, especially in traditional clothes, and trying to emulate the tradition of how the coffee was originated, and the smell, ambient, and everything. I felt like this is how a community should gather to celebrate someone who has done a lot. So I'm so happy that I got to attend. And number two, I saw a lot of young folks in this room. It's so great to see that on a weekend, parents took their time to bring their kids to events like this, because Minister Tibolo touched this, it is so important to keep our kids engaged. Look, I'm so honored to serve along with Minister Tibolo and so many various ministers and cabinet ministers and caucus members, because I came to Canada at the age of 14. I did multiple part-time jobs from like Tim Hortons to factories to dishwashing. So now I'm so honored to serve in the public office as an MPP and get to work with community leaders like Liban and do what we can do best in our time to bring some good projects to where I represent in Scarborough. So, for example, 3 or 4 years ago, Minister Tibolo came down to Scarborough, met with Liban, and we had a round table to address mental health issues and how we can tackle mental health issue in a culturally sensitive way. And that's a term I learned from him as well. So it's good to see that it's everything coming back to cycle, where Liban invited Minister Tibolo and myself for an EthioCan and Eritrean communities event to celebrate someone who has done a lot. Before I finish, I just want to say one thing to all the young folks here. Right now in Scarborough, we are building the first ever medical school after like years. The last time Toronto built a medical school was in 1841. So after 1841 in Canada, in Toronto, we are building a medical school is because I got the opportunity to serve. So my message for all the young folks here, if I can come to Canada and become an MPP, one of you can become the next Prime Minister of Canada.
That is, I'll second that, and that is an important message to all the volunteers, all of you guys that have been helping today, that have been helping with volunteering and supporting community events. This is a message for you, and it doesn't get any more real than Mr. Tanagi Salam standing here in front of you, telling you his stories. You don't need to be an immigrant, but if you're born here, you have aspirations. This is a beautiful country. You have opportunities. You have a community that believes in you. So go for it. Don't hold back. Dr. Haile, I'm going to call on you just in a little bit. We're okay? Okay. So we have 2 more people that are going to say a few words about Dr. Haile, but we're going to have you come and get the award at this point. Let's give it up to Dr. Haile.
Presenting you with something called a challenge coin. I'm not sure if you all know what that is, but a challenge coin is a tradition that goes back to the ancient Romans. It's a military tradition, and what it does is it identifies people that are like, they come from the same group, they come from the same family, and this particular coin is my challenge coin. As a Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, I don't give these to anyone. I give them to very special people that earn them. This coin says on it, "In mente sana, in corporum sanum." So a sound mind needs a sound body. A sound body needs a sound mind. So I'm going to present you with a certificate and with a challenge coin.
So this is the award that's been especially made for Dr. Haile. You can open it, yes.
This award is actually on behalf of EthioCan Bridge the Gap and Taibu Community Health Center. So thank you, Taibu.
My own life, my own professional trajectory, and so this is such a beautiful full circle moment. There's a Bible verse that came to my mind: "Do not despise the day of small beginnings." And I don't know when you were back in 2004 publishing your first papers that you would have imagined a day like this, but probably also all the little ripple effects that you're not aware of. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to tell you about one of those ripples. And so for myself, in the early 2000s, when Dr. Fenta was beginning to publish his early work that was documenting the challenges and the patterns and some of the things that we were seeing in refugee communities, immigrant communities, and specifically the Ethiopian community in Toronto. I was an undergraduate student at U of T, and doing lots of things, figuring my life out. But I was also beginning to do work in the Ethiopian community with young people. And it was the early days when we were starting to mobilize what would eventually become Young Diplomats, which is a youth-led organization. But before there was the YD, before my career began, I was an undergraduate student trying to figure things out. And so I was seeing things happening in the community with, I was born and raised in Toronto, by the way, to Ethiopian parents. So I'm one of the older people that you would find born in Canada to Ethiopian parents. And so I always say that I grew up as the community was growing around me. And so I was seeing things in my life and the community around me, and I was trying to make sense of it. I was trying to make sense of the beautiful things as well as the challenging things. And so as an undergraduate student, I had an opportunity to start to do some independent research for my coursework. I actually invited my prof, who was a supervisor there. I'm not sure. Oh, you're here. Hi. It's been a long time. Professor William Watson, who's there at the back. And so Professor Watson supervised some of these independent studies. And so, I was sitting with Dr. Watson. I'm not sure if you remember these conversations. And he said, what I really want to do, I was in the criminology program, and I said, what I really want to do is try to understand some more about the Ethiopian community. And he was like, do it. We'll figure it out, just do it. And so I did, and I was going into the libraries and the online, directories, trying to find anything to just, document some things about our community. And what did I find? I found your work, right? And you were the first one who put those stories to pen and paper and published them in those peer-reviewed journals. And it might not, I'm not sure what that meant to you at the time, but for me as an undergrad student, as a young Ethiopian in the community, trying to make sense of, what was happening around, it was blowing, and it felt really validating to know that our stories matter, that there was, we were documenting our stories and that there was a path forward. And so those early, I did a couple of early, undergraduate research studies that began to pile up, and then we did a community-based research project looking at issues in the Ethiopian youth community that was very much inspired and built off of your work, that became the seed that became Young Diplomats. And all of this work, work began to really build up. And in my own personal life, it was part of, what inspired me to do my own academic research that looked at the Ethiopian diaspora community, which I continued into my doctorate studies and now continue as well as a researcher. And so it's such a beautiful, day, and such an honor as well to be here and share space with you, and to take this time to honor your work. Again, those small, humble beginnings that have brought us, this far, and I know will continue to take our community forward. So thank you so much.
I'm going to perhaps embarrass Dr. Haile a little bit and say that in that spirit, the steering committee of EthioCan Bridge has decided that what better way to keep his work and his values alive than to set up a scholarship. So we're going to have a scholarship set up for a graduating high school student once a year for $1,000 the next 5 years in his name. And he's going to set the criteria. He's going to say, what kind of values am I looking? This would be a student pursuing post-secondary education. So this is, I think, more than just celebrating him on a Saturday afternoon. This is more about how do we keep his work alive. And this is going to be a perpetual scholarship. We're hoping they'll continue forward. So, Dr. Haile, please come on up.
What can I say? It's really very exciting event. First of all, I would like to thank the mighty God for allowing me to be here in this very exciting event. I would also like to thank Dr. Carl and Sadi for just bringing me up to this level, which is really very important for me. It's really very difficult to express my gratitude to you for giving me such a high record for my academic achievement. Quite frankly, I never knew this, that you will put me in such a high rank. Hence a day, last time told me or called me to inform that there is a process that I will be honored for the work that I have done in the past. The only thing I said at that time was just simply gratitude. This is one of the most important events in my professional career, really. That's why I'm really shocked. Indeed, this honor will boost my self-confidence and help me attain more success in the future. So what I have to say is thank you, simply thank you for this unexpected and humbling honor. God bless.
በጣም እናመሰግናለን ዶክተር ኃይሌ። እኔ ጭብጨባ ቢበቃ አይመስለኝም። በህብረተሰባችን ውስጥ ፈርቀዳጅ ናቸው። ባልተመቻቸ ወጣ ገባ በሆነ መንገድ ውስጥ በሙያቸው እንዲህ አይነት አስተዋጽኦ በማድረግ ሌላው መጪው ተተኪው ትውልድ ምሳሌ እንዲያደርጋቸው ትልቅ ስራ የሰሩ ባለሙያ ናቸውና እጅግ በጣም እናመሰግናቸዋለን። የራሳችንን ብዙ ጊዜ በእጃችን ያዝነውን የራሳችንን አናይም እና በውስጣችን ያሉትን አናይም። ራሳቸው አንገታቸውን ደፍተው በዝምታ ብዙ ነገር የሰሩ ሰው ናቸው። ጊዜ ደግሞ ደግ ነው። ዛሬ በግላጭ አውጥቷቸው ለዚህ ለክብር ስላበቃቸው እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን። በጣም ሁላችንም ደስ ይለናል። አሁንም እድሜ ሰጥቷቸው ደግሞ ይሄን የኛ ድርጅት በደንብ የሚቋቋምበትን አመራሩን ምክሩን እንዲሰጡንና ወደ ተሻለ ደረጃ እንድንዘልቅ ተስፋ እናደርጋለን። ለልጆቻችንም ደግሞ ይሄ ትልቅ መንገድ ከፋች ስለሆነ በጣም ትልቅ ነገር ነው። በጣም እናመሰግናቸዋለን እና እግዚአብሔር ይስጥልን፣ እድሜ ይስጥልን እና በክብር ላይ ክብር ይጨምርልን። ከሳቸው እናንተም ደግሞ ጊዜያችሁን ወስዳችሁ እንደዚህ የራሳችን ሰው አለ ለዚህ ደረጃ ላይ የደረሰ ይህንን የሰራ ብላችሁ ለዚህ ተሰብስባችሁ አይን በሚሞላ መንገድ ተሰብስበን አንድ ላይ ሆነን በፍቅር በመከባበር በአንድነት ልናከብራቸው መቻላችን እጅግ በጣም እናመሰግናለን። እናንተንም እግዚአብሔር ይስጥልን። እንደ አባትነታቸው እንደ መሪነታቸው እስቲ እኛ ለወደፊቱ ለልጆቻችን የምንመኛቸው ምን ነገሮች ናቸው ብለን አገልግሎት እንድትጥሉ አድርገን ነበረ። ስትገቡ የሚሰማችሁን ጽፋችሁ አስባችሁ ሳይሆን ዝም ብሎ ለጭንቅላታችሁ መጣው ጽፋችሁ እዛ ውስጥ እንድትከቱ ብለን ነበርና ያንን እስቲ አሁን እንክፈተውና ዶክተር ኃይሌ እስቲ አንዱ የመጀመሪያውን ያንብቡልንና ምርቃታቸውን ሰጥተውን ወደ ቦታቸው ይመለሳሉ። አመሰግናለሁ።
Just to briefly recap, thank you, Johannes. Thank you, Dr. Haile. This is, for those of you that weren't following, maybe Amharic, this is Mudai. It's a traditional kind of artifact, if you will. But as you guys were coming in, we were asking for you to share your thoughts, write what you thought about the event, what you thought about mental health,
and also to share the one thing that you want the next generation to inherit. What is it, the one thing that you want, the younger kids to have? We've asked people as you come in to write just the one word, and we wanted Dr. Haile to read at least, 3 or 4. And with that, it's open, and we have a few. community. Be your authentic self. Be real. Follow your passion. Don't try to be someone else. It says, Salam. We want peace. Well, these are. Be confident and resilient.
ትንሽ ምርቃት ደግሞ የራሱን ጨምሮ
እሺ ለሰማች በጣም ምንም ቃል የለኝም ለእውነት ሪሊ በጣም ቬሪ ኢምፖርታንት ፎር ማይ ላይፍ እና ይሄንን ሪሊ ማግኘቴ ትልቅ ምርቃት ነው እና እግዚአብሔር ይስጥልኝ በጣም ነው የማመሰግን ጸደይን ብዙ ጊዜ አገኛት የነበረው በስልክ እና በጣም ኢንከሬጅ ነው የምታደርገኝ ደግሞ እንደዚህ ሪቮሉሽናራይዝ መደረጉን I'm completely far behind because detached ሆኜ ትንሽ ቆይቻለሁ ከስራ እና I'm retired now and it's really very important. I think you are pulling me back again.
እናመሰግናለን ዶክተር ኃይሌ ወደ መቀመጫ ይመለሱ።
However, there were things that were happening in the community that I think we don't properly talk about that I think were very obvious to me and a lot of the kids that I was growing up with. So I used to hear about shootings all the time. So it used to start with a whisper of a friend, then it would be a friend, then it'd be my cousins, then my brothers got shot at, then one of my best friends is in a wheelchair because the gun violence in some of these communities that we don't speak about ripples through these communities. So some of the work that I started with was just trying to show that gun violence and its connections to mental health, because what I was seeing was the violence and the trauma of a bullet doesn't just stop once you shoot that bullet. It is the reverberations in the communities that happen for the years and decades afterwards when you lose somebody who you never expected to, and you lose that sense of safety, and that's what I work with. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I want to just start with some basic facts and try to talk about the state of Black mental health in Ontario and go from there. So I'm going to give a very general overview about what we're dealing with. So I want to give some facts. So one of the facts I want to start with is people from Caribbean, East, West African origin in Ontario have a 60% increased risk of psychosis. So when I deal with a lot of schizophrenia in the hospital, and when I see young East African youth, Black youth, going through a situation where, you know, they don't have a lot of support, they don't know what's going on when they have these situations happen to them. And we have such statistics like 23% of Black youth being introduced to the mental health system by police. So the introduction of mental health and policing is so intertwined in our communities that we don't see it sometimes as the thing that can help us because it is used against us a lot of the time. So the healthcare system hasn't always been there to serve us, and we have to understand what's going on. So I want to break it down to three main topics that I think we have to focus on. So it's the anti-Black racism that many of us do know through our experiences in Canada that does still exist and is still a very big part of the healthcare system. Limited access to care, so the resources will always be something that we have to deal with and not getting it timely when it's needed. And then stigma. I think stigma is a huge proportion that we don't talk about properly because there's issues from other communities looking towards us and the Black communities and us looking at ourselves that I think we have to deal with. Next slide, please. So again, these are the three main issues that I want to talk about. So I'm going to start with anti-Black racism, talking about that, the stigma within and outside of our communities, and then going to that lack of resources. Next slide. All right. Can you click it 2 more times, please? All right. So systemic barriers. So anti-Black racism. We know a lot of the statistics that we see. So access to practitioners is delayed for Black youth overall. So Black Caribbean populations wait on average 16 months to access mental health care when the average time for a white person would be 8. So we spend double the time to get access to care versus the average population. And then also the overrepresentation in voluntary services. So when we do access the mental health care system, it's usually through the emergency department or via the police. So when people are already in crisis is when we finally deal with the system. And that's something I see constantly. It's unacceptable sometimes. So the data shows Black Ontarians are likely to see longer delays accessing care, more likely to experience adverse pathways to care, such as the emergency room or police, than people of white European descent. And then we also know these things with the practitioner-related barriers. So we have practitioners. I've had professors in the past that tell me a lot of the things that are happening in their community are not happening. You know, we have the idea of implicit biases, not understanding the idea of where these people come from or the things that impact them, and thinking that people are inherently violent or inherently bad, when these are things that, you know, I would say time and time again, people are a product of the circumstances. If we don't improve those circumstances, how can we expect them to do better? And then we have the personal and cultural barriers. So again, when it comes to these different communities trying to interact with a system that was never made to initially work for them, we have to kind of understand that it takes a lot of work. There's a lot of trying to go against the system, brushing against it, and sometimes we have to really figure out how to make this easier for us. So next slide, please. So I want to give a story, actually. So I work with many groups. One of the groups I'm very lucky to work with is Doctors for Defunding the Police. So I'm one of the co-founders of a group that focuses on the scoping of policing being too broad, and that the idea that the majority of the things that police are sent to do in our communities are non-violent in nature. I think this last statistics are 80% plus of the calls that police have are non-violent in nature. And if we have these police officers being sent to non-violent mental health calls, addiction calls, homelessness calls, domestic violence, these things that could be very much solved without somebody with a gun, we are losing a lot of the resources that we could have. So I want to tell the story about how it not just stops us from having the resources we need, but at times it actively works against us in the mental health care system trying to work with these patients. So this patient, Dr. Ms. Chantal Krupka, she's an amazing woman who was unfortunately shot during a domestic dispute. There's a domestic dispute call on Mother's Day. The police came, there was an altercation, and she ended up getting shot in the stomach. She ended up going to the ICU not knowing if she was going to make it. But what happened was the police gave direct information to the doctors that were there at the time, and the doctors took it verbatim. So what the police had said was she had been aggravated, she had assaulted them, and she was going to be charged as well. So this was the whole point, what she was saying, that she was the instigator of these effects. But what had happened was when us as mental health providers tried to work with her and try to say, okay, what happened? She was completely shut down. She had a system that just kind of worked against her. And she saw that if the doctors are just going to believe what the police say verbatim, then why do I even have to talk? And it was only after, until we got the documentation to come out as to what happened, that we were able to get some justice for her, and the police officer who shot her was eventually fired. But to get to that point, she had to go through so much turmoil and fighting the system to get her documentation to show proof. And I really want to show that us in the mental health care system, when we have to work with the police like this, and there's such a distrust with certain communities because of the things that they're experiencing constantly, we're fighting an uphill battle. So I think we have to be honest about what we're seeing at the time. So, next slide, please. So stigma. This is, please, if you take one thing home, this will be one of the biggest things. But this study, so there was a study conducted by Ottawa Public Health where they showed that 66% of participants, these are Black participants, believe that most people would think less of somebody who's affected by mental illness. So listen to what I just said. 66, so two out of every three Black people think that if you are affected by a mental illness, you would think of that person as less than. And even more than that, 40% of them believe that seeking treatment for a mental health issue is a sign of personal failure. Do you see what we're doing to ourselves? We're really putting this on our own backs and within our own communities and really keeping it hush-hush. When what I see constantly is people that look like us all the time coming in severe crisis. When what we need is a proactive stance on all of this stuff and getting people as soon as possible. Because we have other studies like this. So people who rank their own, Black Canadians who rank their own mental health as poor or fair, we're 25% less likely to seek mental health treatment. So even when we know we have these issues, we don't seek help. And again, this could be to the point where, 60% of Black Canadians would be more willing to use mental health services if the provider was Black, if they understand the cultural competence. So maybe that's something we can work on. But we have to take new approaches to dealing with these issues because it's getting very bad in the ED some of the time. Okay? Next slide. So I just want to give an example of some of the work that we were able to do. So I don't know if some of you were able to be there, but we were holding a Black mental health speaker series where we would bring professionals working in by various fields of mental health to groups of the community overall to just talk about the research and talk about what was going on and really try to bring community gaps together. What we noticed was there was so many similar patterns because we'd open it up to questions in the end. and so many families, so many groups just experiencing the same things over and over again. The idea that, in all of our houses, we have somebody who's suffering. We all have somebody we love who's suffering from depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, drug addiction, suicide. So many things that we face, but we seem to face them in darkness. So, if you go to the next slide, please. So, limited access to resources. So, I want to, again, really hark on this last thing, that at the same time, we have issues like mental health is a huge burden in our overall system, but we don't really appreciate it sometimes. So if you knew that 1 of every 3 people on ODSP currently is due to mental health, like we have a system where our mental health is impacting our physical ability to do things and work and be the productive people that we want to be, but sometimes we just kind of brush it off. We have we spoke about it earlier about the collective culture, trying to keep it hush hush, but a lot of the times to be able to do the best that you need to do, you need to be honest about this. Next slide, please. I'm going to go a little bit fast just because I know we're a little bit behind on time. So I want to bring this up just because I feel like a lot of people know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but I feel like we don't apply it all the time when it comes to the work that we see. So it's the idea that if we don't deal with the basic physiological needs of safety, society, food, the idea is that people have the basics before they can move on, then we're never going to move up to the ideas where, people feel like they belong. People feel like they have a self-esteem, and the goal of self-actualization, where people feel like they have purpose and they feel like they're really a part of the society, right? So we're really failing even before we even get a chance with so many people because they're struggling paycheck to paycheck, day to day, not even able to think about anything greater than that. Next slide, please. So this was from our last event, actually. So Liba's looking good. We have so investing in these community resources. So how do we really get against this? And what does investing in community resources look like? So it looks like this, right? Being here today, working together, trying to network and understand that, there's a lot more that we have available between us that we're going to give credit for. And unless we're talking and understanding what's available, then it'd be impossible to deal with a lot of the issues that we're all dealing with, to be completely honest. Next slide, please. So this is a study I want people to go home with because it really blows me away that this isn't one of the biggest studies that is pushed into the public. Have any of you heard of the ACEs study, the adverse childhood experiences? The idea that, physical trauma, emotional trauma, PTSD, a lot of us come from war-torn, like my parents had war-torn leaving Ethiopia when things were going down. So they had a lot of trauma that they didn't talk about. And when we understand that with ACEs, there's the direct correlation between these traumatic experiences you have in your childhood and physical ailments that you would have later on. So we have statistics that show people have 4 or more of these traumatic ACEs, right? So physical, sexual, whatever traumas they are. They could have up to 200% more likely to have diabetes, 300% more likely to have heart disease, 400% more likely to have COPD. So these are physical ailments that are directly impacted by the trauma that exists in our childhood. And my whole job and the work that I do specifically with youth is trying to break a lot of these cycles to make sure that we have the healthiest and happiest population that we can. Next slide. So again, to really, really draw down the points that we're seeing. So there's connections here between poverty, gun violence, which is my initial work, and mental health. So if you know anything about this map, this is the map of Toronto that shows, so it's the northwest, northeast, and downtown core, that's a little bit dark blue. Those are the communities that are most impacted most by poverty, gun violence, most police, most deaths during COVID-19, slowest for the fire trucks to reach when there's a crisis. So pretty much everything that's bad is kind of circled in certain communities when it comes to Toronto, the GTA. And I think that what we have to start understanding about these issues is when we silo violence in the community off as just a one-off or just as, the idea is these people are suffering in these communities long before these shootings are happening. And what we're supposed to do and what we have to focus on is this is a public health issue. This is a health issue that we need to focus from the first day that these kids are.
But it's really difficult to, for us to use the media, for example, to advertise ourselves, to get position, promotion, and so forth. I have to choose to remove that completely and forge my own way. It's difficult, but I intentionally do it because I feel like our life gets hijacked continuously. And I just don't want to give the mental space every day to that kind of environment. What I'm finding it very challenging is sort of finding the filter for our children. My nieces who are now 10 and 12 years old, my son who's 9, talk about this and say, I would say to them, create your own story. Don't let others create story for you. The first time my son came home and he said to me, why am I the wrong person as a black person? I said, they already hijacked his brain. I didn't get to him early enough, you know. So I had to sit down and think about how am I going to explain this to you. We had to go through, okay, who are you as a black person? Who are you as a black Canadian? And also look at your uncle, you know, look at your mom. And we had to go through this exercise of who we are as a people, where we come from. And oftentimes I say to him, you are the foundation of human beings. Everyone started out from Africa. Let everyone else get that first. And then you can explain to them why you are called the wrong person to exist in this world, you know. So the challenges are there, but I feel like I'm not missing out on a lot of things by not being on social media or by not listening to the news. I chose not to. Sometimes my husband will say to me, you know what, there was something major that happened 2 days ago and I bet you don't know about it. I go, and how do you feel about that? So, but that's a choice. You make a choice, you stick with it. It's difficult, but to me, it serves me well. When someone says to me, did you hear about 7 News? I think, what is that? What's 7 News? And the person was very upset with me. He said, as an Ethiopian, you should care about what's happening in Ethiopia. And I said, sure, there are different ways to care about Ethiopia. In my life, in my world, I see it as my workplace where I see other Ethiopians working in the hospital. How do I relate to them? How do I uplift them? You know, how do we work with the people I see right in front of me? That I could have direct impact on. But something that's happening in Ethiopia, I'm too far away from them. So I feel like I lose control over being able to have effective change if I'm just listening to it and absorbing it. It will take me down. So I choose not to see it. I avoid it. It's not the ideal thing for some people because they have family members who are living through it. But I also see family members who live it every day, watch it every day intensely, and how stressed they are, how depressed they are about the situation, to a point where they lost the past year or two of their life to this. You could literally see them just every day waking up to YouTube. They want to know what's happening. And I don't know if it doesn't have a positive effect on your life. So I always say, just leave it behind. In real life. So I still, sometimes I'm told, you're living under the rock because I don't listen to the news.
To it. We're straddling two worlds, right? We have Ethiopia, the country, and we're here as immigrants. And I think many of you have elaborated on how tough it is to juggle and how long we've been here as a community, 40 plus years, and why have we not made progress? And I think we do such a great job of keeping up with what's going on in Ethiopia. We've forgotten us here. You know, we've forgotten that we are Black immigrants in this country, and we have put on the blinders and are not seeing the things that are keeping us down, that are keeping our kids down, that are leading to so many problems individually and families as a community. So of prime importance to me is to be selfish, and you know that's what's considered. You know, ራስ ወዳድነት ነው የሚባለው አይደል? በአማርኛ ለሀገር ሳታስብ ለራስ ታስባለህ ይባላል። ግን we have to start with us. We have to start with our own selves. We have to be kind to ourselves. Not watching depressing news day in and day out. I understand there's family there. You're worried about family. That's a tough juggling act. But unless we take care of ourselves, we break down at some point. You can't be any good to your country. You can't be good to yourself, your kids, your family. So I think it's all the mental health issues that we discuss stem out of the system that we live in. And if we understand that we're Black immigrants, there are systemic issues that we need to overcome. We need to be represented at higher levels in politics, and that's really how you get things. You know, so we have a lot of history to fall back on. We know what's worked, we know what hasn't worked. So we have a wealth of knowledge, individuals that can guide us through this process as we go forward. So I think we need to focus on us as Black immigrants. I know there's some debate about whether we're Black or not, but you know, that's from the outside looking in. If someone was looking from the outside, they see a whole bunch of Black people kind of having a conversation, right? no one really cares about the internal kind of friction politics. So I think we just need to be kind to ourselves and start with us first. Thank you.
ደግሞ በድጋሚ ስለጋበዛችሁኝ ለእናንተ ብቻ ሳይሆን ለእኔ ትልቅ ትምህርት ነው። እኔም ብዙ ተምሬ ነው ከዚህ የሚሄደውና ለምትሰሩት ስራ ሁሉ ለሀገራችሁም ህዝብ ለሚቀጥለውም ጀነሬሽን አጌስ እዚህ ኢትዮ ካናዲያን ነው መሰለኝ የሚባሉት ለእነሱም ጥሩ አርአያ እየሆናችሁ ስለምትሄዱ በተሰበሰበውም ስም በራሴም ስም አሜሪካን ሀገር ሆነንም በምንሰራው በዚህ ስፔስ ውስጥ በምንሰራው ሁሉ ስም ሆነን በጣም ነው የምናመሰግናችሁ። እኔ እንግዲህ ባጭሩ እንደተገለጸላችሁ ዮዲት አማሃ እባላለሁ ከፊላደልፊያ ነው የመጣሁት። ብዙ ስለ ዲግሪ ስለምን እንግዲህ ማውራቱ ምንም ዋጋ የለውም። ዋናው አብረን ማደግ እንዴት ነው የምንችለው፣ አብረን መራመድ እንዴት ነው የምንችለው፣ ህብረተሰባችን እንዴት ነው ልናሳድግ የምንችለው፣ ራሳችንንስ እንዴት ነው መርምረን ራሳችንን ብቁ የምናደርገው ለዚህ ስራ እዛ ላይ መስራቱ ነው እና ከሶሻል ወርክ እንግዲህ እድሜን ማስገመቴ ካልሆነ 30 ዓመት በላይ ሰርቻለሁ። ከዛ በላይ የአራት ልጆች እናት ነኝ። ስለዚህ በዚህ እዚህ ማለት የመጨረሻዋ ልጄ 26 ስትሆን ትልቋ ልጄ 32 ነች እና እዚህ ሀገር ልጅ ማሳደግ ማንንም ሜንታል ውስጥ እንደሚያስገባ ታውቁታላችሁ። ስለዚህ በተሞክሮ ታሽቼ ነው እዚህ የደረስኩት እና ተሞክሮዬንም የስራዬንም ሁሉንም አንድ ላይ ነው ዛሬ ለእናንተ ሼር ለማድረግ የምፈልገውና በመጀመሪያ ከመጀመሪያ በፊት አንዴ ለራሳችሁ ለኔ ሳይሆን ለራሳችሁ አንዴ ብታጨበጭቡ ደስ ይለኛል። እንድታጨበጭቡ ደግሞ የፈለኩበት ምክንያት ይሄ ከባድ ጫንቃ ሀገራችንም ዓለም ላይ በሙሉ ሜንታል ሄልት doesn't matter የመጀመሪያው ዓለም አሜሪካ፣ ካናዳ፣ ዩሮፕ ቢሆን ሰርድ ወርልድም ሁሉም ጋር ሜንታል ሄልት የማይነካ ቶፒክ ነው። የማይነካ የሰለጠነው ዓለም እርግጥ አሁን በብዙ በትምህርትም በተለያየ ነገር እየዳሰሰው ነው ያለው፣ ግን ስቲል ከማንነት ጥያቄ ጋር አብሮ የሚገናኝ ስለሆነ ብዙ ሰው በተቻለ የሚገፋው ቶፒክ ነው እና የኛ ህብረተሰብ ደግሞ እኔ አልነግራችሁ ታውቁታላችሁ፣ ሙሉ ቀን ሲነገር ነው ያለው። ያንን ለማወቅ እኔም አለብኝ መስራት እችላለሁ፣ ማገዝ እችላለሁ፣ ራሴን መሻሻል ፈልጋለሁ ብለን እንደዚህ አይነት ስብስብ ላይ ድር ሳይሆን ዝክር ሳይሆን ሰርግ ሳይሆን ሌላ ነገር ሳይሆን ለዚህ ትምህርት መምጣታችን ራሱ ለኛ ትልቅ የፊት እርምጃ ነው የወሰድነው። አንድ ወደፊት ነው የተራመድነው ወይም ሁለት ወደፊት ነው የተራመድነው። ለዚህ ነው እንድታጨበጭቡ የፈለኩት። ስለዚህ እጅግ በጣም አመሰግናለሁ እዚህ ድረስ መጣችሁ ይሄንን ትምህርት ስለምትካፈሉ። ይሄንን ትምህርት ከኔ ብቻ አይደለም የምትካፈሉት፣ እኔ ከእናንተ መማር እፈልጋለሁ። እዚህ ብዙ አባቶቼና እናቶቼ ያላችሁ፣ ወንድሞቼና እህቶቼ ያላችሁ፣ በልጆቼም ደረጃ ያላችሁ የሁላችንም ድምጽ ነው መስማት የምፈልገው። ምክንያቱም እኔ ብቻ ሳልሆን ድምጻችሁ በተሰማ ጊዜ አንዱ ከእናንተ ይማራል። እኔ ብቻ ለካ አይደለሁም የሚለውን እንግዲህ ከይቅርታ ጋር ነው። ምክንያቱም አዘጋጂ ስባል በእንግሊዝኛ ነበር ያዘጋጀው። ስለዚህ ትንሽ ፖዝ ማድረግ አይቀርም። እንግሊዝኛ ወደ አማርኛ እየተረጓጎምኩኝ አንዳንድ ቦታም ደግሞ እንግሊዝኛ ቃላቶችን ጣል ማድረግ አይቀርም። ያልገባችሁ ነገር ካለ እጃችሁን አውጥታችሁ ጠይቁኝ። ምክንያቱም ሳይገባችሁ ጥላችሁ ከምትወጡ ታይማችሁንም ዌስት አድርጋችሁ እንዴም እናንተም ከኔ ተማምረ መውጣቱ ነው ዋናው ነገር። ውዳት እንጀምራለን። እንግዲህ ቶፒኩ እንደሚለው እኔ ዛሬ እዚህ ቁጭ ብዬ ስኪዞፍሬኒያ ምን እንደሆነ፣ ዲፕሬሽን ምን እንደሆነ፣ ኤንዛይቲ ጭንቀት ምን እንደሆነ ላስረዳችሁ አይደለም። እሱ ሜዲካል መጽሐፍ ላይ ያለ ሳይኪያትሪስቶች ጋር መሄድ ይቻላል። እኔ ያ ነገር ሲመጣብን ምንድነው ማድረግ ያለብን፣ ሳይመጣስ እንዴት ነው ልንከታተለው የምንችለው የሚለው ላይ ነው ፎከስ ማድረግ ዛሬ የፈለኩት። ምክንያቱም ሙሉ ቀንም በተመሳሳይ ከተለያዩ ባለሙያዎች ይህን ስንሰማ ነው የዋልነው። የዛሬው ትምህርት ታይትል ፋይንዲንግ አ ዌይ ፎርወርድ ነው። እንዴት ነው ወደፊት የምንሄደው? በጣም ነው ደስ ያለኝ ታይትሉን ሳየው። እንዴት ነው ወደፊት መሄድ የምንችለው? ወደፊት ለመሄድ we have to go through it በውስጡ ማለፍ አለብን። ወደር እኛም እንሆን የአእምሮ ችግር የገጠመን ቤተሰቦቻችንም ይሁኑ ጎረቤቶቻችንም ይሁኑ ማንም አጠገባችን ያለው ይሁን ያንን ለመረዳት በዛ ውስጥ ማለፍ መቻል አለብን። ግዴታኛ መታመም አለብን ማለት አይደለም። ግን በዛ ሰውዬ ጫማ ውስጥ ገብተን ለማየት መሞከር አለብን። ብዙ ጊዜኛ ምንድነው የምናደርገው? ቶሎ ለፈራጅነት ነው የምንቸኩለው። ካልቸራችንም የወሰነው ሊሆን ይችላል፣ ፍርሃትም ሊሆን ይችላል። ብዙ ጊዜ ያ ሰው ነው ያለው ማለት እኔ ደህና አድርጎ ሊያሳየኝ የሚችለኝ ሊመስልም ይችላል። ግን ከዛ ሁሉ ተቆጥበን እንዴት ነው በዛ ውስጥ ልናልፍ የምንችለው? ተረድተን የዛንም ቁስል በዛ ጫማ ውስጥም ገብተን እኛም እዛ ውስጥ ካለን ደግሞ ሰርቪሶችን ፈልገን አምነን ይሄ ነው ችግራችን ብለን አሁን ቶሮንቶ መተሽ በህይወት ኢንፐርሰን መተሽ ይሄንን ነገር አድርጊ ብለውኝ ሲጠይቁኝ አንዳንድ ሪሰርች አለው ስል በጣም ከገረመኝ ነገር አንዱ እናንተ ናችሁ ፓዮኒየሮቹ። መጀመሪያ ብዙ ጥናት የተካሄደው በኢትዮጵያኖች የሜንታል ሄልዝ ችግር ላይ እዚህ ነው። እሱን ደግሞ ዋው ብዬ እንትን ስል በማላምነው መንገድ እሳቸው አጠገቤ ቁጭ ያሉት ዋናው ስታዲውን የሰሩት ዶክተር ኃይሌ ፋንታ መሆናቸው እና ዛሬ ደግሞ ይሄንን ስፔስ ሼር ማድረጌ it's an honor for me እና በ2004 ነው ባልሳሳት አይደለም በ2004 እሳቸው ባደረጉት በኢሚግራንት ባለው ችግር ብቻ ሳይሆን with special focus ኢትዮጵያውያኖች ላይ ብዙ እርዳታ ፎከስ እንዲሆን አድርገዋል። ኢንተርኔት አለ ግን ብዙ ጊዜ በተለይኛ ከጥቁር ሀገር የምንመጣ we're the last on the list እና እንደነሱ አይነት ሪሰርች የሚያደርጉ ሰዎች እንድንታወቅ አለውና ከዛም አልፎ ተርፎ ዛሬ እዚህ ብዙ ሊቃውንቶች ስላላችሁ ከተሳሳትኩኝ እንድታረሙኝ እፈልጋለሁ። ምክንያቱም ትክክል ያልሆነ ኢንፎርሜሽን መስጠት አልፈልግም። however in 2006 አራት የኢትዮጵያ ፕሮፌሰሮች ብዙ ቦታ ኮንታክት አድርገው ስኩል ኦፍ ሳይኪያትሪ ዲፓርትመንት ኦፍ ሳይኪያትሪ አዲስ አበባ ዩኒቨርሲቲ ኮንታክት አድርገው እርዳታ ለማግኘት ብዙ ቦታ ሳያገኙ የእናንተ ዩኒቨርሲቲ ነው በመጀመሪያ ደረጃ የረዳው። ዩኒቨርሲቲ ኦፍ ቶሮንቶ ነው የረዳው። መርዳት ብቻ ደግሞ አይደለም፣ ፋንዲንግ መርዳት ብቻ አይደለም። ከዩኒቨርሲቲ ኦፍ ቶሮንቶ እየሄዱ እዛ አስተምረው ከዛ ጎበዞቹን እያመጡ እዚህ እንዲማሩ አድርገው ብዙ ሳይኪያትሪስቶች እንድናፈራ ካደረጉት ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች አንዱ የእናንተ ዩኒቨርሲቲ ነው። እናንተ ደህና ቦታ ላይ ያላችሁ ናችሁ፣ መረዳት የምትችሉበት ቦታ ያላችሁ ናችሁ። ቅድምም ሁለት ትልልቅ ሰዎች መጥተው የፓርላመንት ሰዎች መጥተው እርዳታቸውን ሲገልጹ አይቻለሁ። ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ in 2006 11 ሳይኪያትሪስት የነበረው in 2000 I believe 15 ወደ 7 ነው አይደለም? 7 ሳይኪያትሪስት ነው ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ የፈራው። most of it በዩኒቨርሲቲ ኦፍ ቶሮንቶ እርዳታ ነው። ሁሉም ነው ማለት ነው። አሁን ደግሞ 2023 ላይ አምኖት ሹር ምን ያህል እንደደረሰ ግን በጣም በእድገት ላይ ነው ያለው። ይሄ አእምሯችን እየተከፈተ ለመረዳዳት ኦፕን እየሆንን እንደመጣን የሚያሳየን ነው። ስለዚህ አንድ ለሳቸው እናጨብጭብላቸው ይሄንን ትልቅ መንገድ ለካፋችሁ። ሁለተኛ ለራሳችሁ እዚህ ያላችሁት ኢትዮጵያውያኖች ትልቅ ቦታ ላይ ነው ያላችሁት። ሪሊ አሜሪካ ነገር ካለው እናንተ በጣም የገሰገሰ ቦታ ላይ ነው ያላችሁት in terms of mental health and the service በፓርላመንት እና በመንግስቱ በደንብ የታወቀ for Ethiopians ለመርዳት። ስለዚህ ያንን ሪሶርስ እኛ ካልተጠቀምን እኛ ያንን ሪሶርስ if we don't go after it it's a waste። ሌሎቹ እኮ ከኋላችን መጥተው የትና የት እየደረሱ ነው ሰርቪሱን እየተጠቀሙ። so it's a privilege እንደዚህ አይነቱን ነገር ቶሮንቶ ላይ መስራት። አሁን ይሄንን የዛሬውን ትምህርት ከመጀመራችን በፊት ምንድነው አንደርስታንዲንጋችን between mental health and mental illness? ሁለቱን አንዳንድ ጊዜ የቀያየርን ነው የምንጠቀምበት። mental health ማንኛችንም ከጥሩ ፖዚቲቭ በሆነ መንገድ adjusted እስካደረግን ድረስ ህይወታችንን በደንብ እስከተመለከትን ድረስ ልናሻሽለው የምንችለው ነው። mental illness በሚሆንበት ጊዜ ግን ዲስኦርደር ነው፣ በበሽታ ደረጃ ነው ያለው። set criteria አለው DSM-5 ላይ ያለ ነው። ስኪዞፍሬኒያ፣ ባይፖለር፣ ADHD፣ ዲፕሬሽን፣ ኤንግዛይቲ በዲስኦርደር ደረጃ ሲሆኑ እነሱ at a higher level ናቸው። on a mental health level ብዙ ጊዜ እነዚህ ሁለቱ ቃላት ይቀያየራሉ። ግን on a mental health level ግን በስትረስ ኢንዲዩስድ በሆነ መንገድ የሚመጡብን ዲፕሬሽን እና ኤንግዛይቲ not at a level of disorder ናቸው። እነሱ ላይ ነው እኛ በጣም ዛሬ ፎከስ እንድናደርግ የምፈልገው። ኢልነሱም እንዳለ ሆኖ ኢልነሱም ሜዲኬሽን ሊያስፈልገው ይችላል፣ ቶክ ቴራፒ ሊያስፈልገው ይችላል። እሱን በሳይኪያትሪ ደረጃ እርዳታውን ብዙ ማግኘት ይቻላል። በሜንታል ሄልት ደረጃ ግን እንዴት ነው ራሳችንን መርዳት የምንችለው? how comfortable are we? ምን ያህል comfortable ነን? ምን ያህል በቀላሉ በዚህ ጉዳይ ላይ መነጋገር እንችላለን? ከሚስታችን፣ ከልጆቻችን፣ ከጓደኞቻችን፣ ከአካባቢያችን ጋራ ምን ያህል መነጋገር እንችላለን? ራሳችን ላይ ያ ጉዳይ ሲደርስብን ምንድነው ወደ ኋላ የሚይዘን? ያንን ቆም ብለን ጠይቀን እናውቃለን ወይ? አጠገባችን ያለውንስ ሪሶርስ እናውቃለን ወይ? and how do እንዴትስ ወደፊት መራመድ እንችላለን? So when we talk about mental illness, ብዙ ጊዜ በሁለቱ ኤንዛይቲ በሜንታል ሄልት እና ሜንታል ኢልነስ ኤንዛይቲ ላይ ያለው ፍሪኩዌንሲ እና ኢንተንሲቲው ነው። ዲስኦርደር በሚሆንበት ጊዜ ኮምፕሊትሊ
ትንሽ አጠር ያለ ነገር ለመናገርና አንድ ቪዲዮ ለማሳየት ነው ተዘጋጅቼ የመጣሁት። ከዚህ ጋር የተያያዘ ስራ እንሰራዋለንና እሱንም ዛሬ ሎንች ለማድረግ ነው።
እንደ መዝጊያ ንግግር አይነት ነገር መሰለኝ አድርግ የተባልኩትና ይህ ቀን ሁሉ ቀን ቢሆን እንዴት ጥሩ ነበር እና በጣም ጥሩ ጊዜ እንደነበራችሁ ተስፋ አደርጋለሁኝ። በጣም ኢምፖርታንት የነበሩ ዲስከሽኖች እንደነበሩ አይቻለሁኝ፣ ሰምቻለሁኝ። አንዳንድ ሰዎች ውስጥ የሚነካ ትንሽ ሰበር የሚያደርግም ግን ደግሞ የሚያጠነክር ለካ ሰዎች እንደዚህ ከሆኑ እኛም እንደዚህ ማድረግ እንችላለን የሚሉ ሀሳቦችን የሰማንባቸው ናቸው እና እኔ በጣም ኢንካሬጅ ሆኛለሁ። እናንተን እንግዲህ እንዴት እንደሆናችሁ አላውቅም። እኛ አሁን እዚህ የሆነ ስብሰባ ውስጥ ዲስከሽን ውስጥ ነበርንና ከተነሱት ሀሳቦች ጋራ ራሴን እየመረመርኩኝ እዚህ ደግሞ ምንድነው የምናገረው እያልኩኝ ሳስብ አንድ አማርኛ ባወራ ደህና ነው አይደል? ኦኬ ነው በእንግሊዝኛ ነው። ይሄኛው የአማርኛ ክፍል መሰለኝ። እሺ አንድ ሰው ምን አለ በእንግሊዝኛ nobody is going to come to rescue us. ኦኬ በተለይ የጥቁር ማህበረሰብ የሆኑ ሰዎች nobody is going to come to rescue us. ለኛ ያለነው እኛ ነን right? ስለዚህ ይሄንን ዛሬ የተመለከትን ይመስለኛል። እኛ ጋር ደግሞ ያለው በጣም ብዙ ነገር አለ። ዛሬ እንዳያችሁት በጣም ብዙ ነገር አለ እና በሶስት ሐሳቦች ልንገርና ከዛ በኋላ ወደ ቪዲዮ እንሄዳለን። ከዚህ በፊትም የተናገርኩት ነገር ነው። ሐሳቡ አትሊስት ኮንቴክስቱ እንደዛ ነው። ብዙ ነገር አለን ስንል ለምሳሌ ዶክተር ኃይሌን ዛሬ ሪኮግናይዝ አደረገ right? ያለን ሀብት ማለት ነው ሪሶርስ፣ ጥንካሬ፣ እውቀት ኖሌጅ among us ያንን እንድናስብ ያስፈልጋል። እንደዚሁም ወዚተ ዊከጎ የአድዋ በዓልን አከበርን right? እነዚህ ነገሮች በጣም ኢምፖርታንት ናቸው ለኛ ለማስታወስ right? ምንም በሌለበት የኛ አቅም ደካማ ነው በተባለበት ዘመን የጣሊያኖች ኃይል በጣም የበዛ ነው ፓወርፉል ነው በተባለበት ሰዓት ማሸነፍ መቻላችን እኛ ውስጥ አንድ ያለ የተቀመጠ ነገር አለ ማለት ነው እና ዛሬ ብዙ የሰማናቸው በጣም የሚከብዱ ነገሮች አሉ በሰው በእኛ ኢንዲቪጁዋሊ በፋሚሊ በኮሚኒቲያችን ውስጥ የምናልፈው ነገር ከባድ ነገር ነው ግን እኛ ውስጥ ያለ ነገር አለ እንደዚህ ከተጥሪ ተደርጎ እንደዚህ ብንገናኝ በእኛ ውስጥ የጠነከረ ነገር አለና አንድ ያንን ያለፈው ነገር ከኛ ጋር ያለን ነገር እንድናስብ ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ዶክተር ኃይሌን ስናስብ ዶክተር ኃይሌ ያደረገው ነገር ለኛ ትምህርትና ሞዴል ይሆናል ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ያለንን ነገር እናስብ የሚለው ነው የመጀመሪያ ሐሳብ። ዛሬ ምን አደረግን እዚህ ተገናኝተን? ብዙ እንደዚህ አይነት ንግግር በሜንታል ሄልት ላይ በራሳችንም ሆነ በጓደኞቻችንም ጋር ሆነ በቤተሰብም ሆነ በቤተ እምነት ውስጥም ሆነ በኮሚኒቲ ውስጥም ሆነ አናደርግ today is በጣም ስፔሻል right? አንዳንድ ኢንዲቪጁዋል ሰዎች የራሳቸውን ስቶሪ ያካፈሉበት ጊዜ ነው። I am sure ጊዜ ቢኖረን እኛ ጋር አሁን ለምሳሌ የተሰበሰብንበት ዛ ጥሩ ዲስከሽን ነበር ጊዜ አልበቃንም እንጂ ሁሉም ሰው ስለራሱ ያለውን የሚያልፍበትን የሜንታል ፕሮብሌም ቢናገር አጥቂት የነበራችሁ ከኔ ጋር ተስማማላችሁ ጊዜ አልበቃንም መናገር እንፈልግ ለምን እንዲህ አይነት በቃ በጣም ያማረ በባህላችን የሆነ ስብስብ ስለነበረ ነው ሴፍ ነው ትራስት ልናደርግ እንችላለን እዚህ ላይ ብዙ መስራት ይገባናል በጣም ብዙ ይገባናል ግን ዛሬ የሆነው ነገር ደግሞ ለኔ በተለይ it's magical እንግዲህ ታይቡ ነው መስራው ታውቃላችሁ የሜንታል ሄልት ፕሮግራም አለን ብዙ ሰው ለመሳተፍ በጣም ችግር ነው ሄደን ፈልገን ነው አውትሪች አድርገን ነው አለ ሰርቪስ ኑ ለማለት ኦኬ የዛሬ 2 አመት 3 አመት ጀምሮ አንድ በኮቪድ ምክንያት ሁለት በጥቁር ማህበረሰብ የተከናወነውን ሁላችንም እናውቀዋለን የጆርጅ ፍሎይድ ጉዳይ አለ የሪጂስ ኮርቺንስ ፓኬት የተለያዩ የጥቁር ማህበረሰብ አባላቶች ቅድም ዶክተር ሳሚር ሲናገር እንደነበረው በፖሊስ እጅ እየጠፉ ብዙ ሰዎች ትሪገርድ ሆኑ በተለይ ደግሞ ወጣቶች ትምህርት ቤት ያሉ ወጣቶች ጥቁር ተማሪዎች በጣም ትሪገርድ ስለሆኑ አሁን ዌቲንግ ሊስት አለን ጥሩ ነው በአንድ በኩል ምክንያቱም ሰዎች መተው መረዳት እንፈልጋለን ይያሉ ነው በሌላ በኩል ደግሞ ግን ያንን ለማለት ያስቻላቸው በውስጣቸው የተከማቸው ችግር ገፍቶ ስለመጣ ነው ስለዚህ በጣም ሲሪየስ እና የበዛ የከበደ ነገር ነው ግን this is what happens right ዛሬ መጥቶ የነበረው ክቡር ሚኒስትሩ በጣም ፋሲኔትድ ሆኖ ነበር እና ስናወራ ይሄ ነው ሜንታል ሄልት ሰርቪስ ማለት ሆስፒታል ያለ ያስፈልጋሉ I know some of the doctors are still here እንፈልጋለን ዶክተሮቻችን ለዛውም ኢትዮጵያዊ የሆኑ ዶክተሮች ዛሬ like ዶክተር ሰሚር ነበረ ዶክተር ሳምራ ነበረች another psychiatrist ያስፈልጉናል ግን ሜንታል ሄልት ሶልቭ የሚሆነው እንደዚህ ነው ራይት ቡና ተፈልቶ ጣኑ ሞቅ ሲል ስንነጋገር ማለት ነው እና ዛሬ ደግሞ የሆነውን እንድናስተውል አሁን ስንሄድ ከዚህ what did really happen today ማንንም ሬስኪው ያደርገንም እኛ ግን አሁን መተናልና we are very grateful for EthioCan bridge ጸደይ ይሄንን ቪዥን ይዛ በመነሳቷ it is great so ትላንት የነበረን በጣም ጠንካራ የሆነ ነገር አለን ዛሬ ደግሞ ያደረግነው ነገር አለ ይሄንንም መያዝ አለብን ይሄ ደግሞ ለነገ ትልቅ ተስፋ ይሰጠናል ነገ ደግሞ አሁን እንደዚህ ተሰባስበን አንድ ሌላ ነገር ያለኝ ሚኒስትሩ ትንንሽ ልጆች አሳየኝና እኔ ከሁሉ የነካኝ እነዚህ መምጣታቸው ነው እዚህ ምክንያቱም የነገውን ነው በጣም ማሻሻል የምንችለው የዛሬው ይከብደናል የነገውን ግን ማሻሻል የምንችለው እዛ ላይ ነው ብሎ አለና this is what we're going to give the next generation ይሄ መቀጠል አለበት ለዚህ ነው every day ቢሆን right every day ቢሆን ጥሩ ነበር ምክንያቱም አንድም I don't know መታደስ አለ አብሮ ሲኖር እንደዚህ መገናኘት ምናምን ሰጠናል አብረን ደግሞ ምን ቀጥለው መንገድ ይሆናልና ራሳችንን ኢንከሬጅ እንድናረግ EthioCan bridge ሰፖርት እንድናረግ ሌሎች ብዙ አሉ አርት ኤንድ ሄልት እና ሄደን አሉ እነሱን ሰፖርት እንድናረግ ሌሎችንም የሚቋቋሙትን እንትኖች እየተሳተፍን እየመጣን ያገዝን እኛም እየታገዝን that's how we do community mental health እና ዛሬ በጣም ኢንከሬጅ የሚያደርግ ስለሆነ በጣም ላመሰግናችሁ እወዳለሁኝ ያው ታይቡ ከምንሰራቸው ስራዎች አንዱ ያው ሰርቪስ መስጠት ነው ኤዱኬሽናል አዌርነስ መስጠት ነው እንደዚህ አይነት እንትኖችን ማድረግ ነው ብዙዎቻችሁ የምታውቁ አይመስልም ካወቃችሁ ፋይን የዚህ ሳምንት ብላክ ሜንታል ሄልት ዊክ ተብሎ የሚከበር ሳምንት ነው the first week of march ብላክ ሜንታል ሄልት ዊክ ተብሎ ነው የሚታሰበው በቶሮንቶ ከተማ ይሄም ሐሳብ ጸደይ ይሄንን ቀን ፕላን ሲያደርጉ ከዚህ ከብላክ ሜንታል ሄልት ጋር የተያያዘ ብላክ ሜንታል ሄልት እንዴት ተጀመረ ብትሉኝ የሲቲ ኦፍ ቶሮንቶ በየአመቱ የሚያዘጋጃቸው ካምፔኞች ነበሩ ቶሮንቶ ፎር ኦል ካምፔን የሚባል ካምፔን እና በተለያዩ ቶፒኮች ላይ ካምፔን አድርገዋል ሆሞፎቢያ፣ ኢስላሞፎቢያ፣ ሬሲዝም ምናምን የተመሳሰሉትን እና አምስተኛውና የመጨረሻው ካምፔን ለማድረግ የፈለጉት ልክ ኮቪድ እንደመጣ ነው ከኮቪድ በፊት ስለነበረ ምንድነው የፈለጉት በብላክ ሜንታሊቲ ላይ ካምፔን ማድረግ ፈለጉና ያው የጥቁር ድርጅት ስለሆነን እኛ ጋር መጡና we want to partner with you አሉ። ግሬት ብለን ኮሚኒቲ ሰዎችን ሰበሰብን። ግን እኛ ጋር ሜንታል ሄልት በጣም ከባድ ነገር ስለሆነ እንደዚሁ ለአንድ ወር ፖስተር ሶርተን ባስ ሼልተር ላይ አድርገን ፌብሩዋሪ ላይ በቃ ትልቅ ካምፔን ተደርጎ ማርኬቲንግ ምናምን ተደርጎ የሚያቆም ነገር አይደለም። ስለዚህ if we going to partner ቀጣይ የሆነ ነገር እንፈልጋለን ብለን ስላልናቸው በዛን ጊዜ የነበረው ሜየር the first Monday of March Black Mental Health Day ተብሎ እንዲጠራ 2019 ፕሮክሌም አደረጉት። ኮቪድ መጣ 2020 ኮቪድ መጣ። ስለዚህ አንድ ቀን አይበቃንም የኛን ጉዳይ የኛን ሜንታሊቲ ለመናገር አንድ ቀን አይበቃንም ስለተባለ አሁን a week ሆኗል። every first week of March Black Mental Health Day ነው። ስለዚህ በዛ ጊዜ እንደዚህ አይነት ነገሮችን ለማድረግ ማለት ነው ዝም ብለን Black Mental Health Day ተብሎ እንዲታሰብ ሳይሆን እኛ ተገናኝተን እንድንነጋገር ስቲግማችንን ከኛ ላይ ትንሽ ቀረፍ ያደረግን እንድናወጣ ሌሎች ድርጅቶች ደግሞ ስለ Black Mental Health እንዴት ነው የሚሆነው ችግራቸው ምንድነው ባሪየራቸው ምንድነው ሰርቪስ እንዴት ነው ማግኘት የሚችሉት የሚሉትም ደግሞ እነሱ እንዲነጋገሩ Black Mental Health Week የተጀመረው ከዛ ነው እና አሁን በቶሮንቶ በካናዳ ውስጥ this has taken part ሌሎችም ከተሞች እንደነ ኦታዋ ያሉ እንደነ ብራምፕተን ያሉ have proclaimed officially proclaim አድርገውታልና this conversation is our health ይሄ ነው እኛን አሁን የሚያድሰንና let's continue the work በየጊዜው መሆን ያለባቸው ነገሮች ይኖራሉና ከዛ ጋር አብሮ የተያያዘ awareness campaign educate ሊያደርግ የሚችል ሰዎች እንደዚህ መገናኘት ባንችል at least resource ፈጥረን ሰዎች በዛ እንዲሳተፉ አንድ ያዘጋጀነው ቪዲዮ አለና it is a great honor ዛሬ እዚህ EthioCan ባዘጋጀው ፕሮግራም ላይ ያንን ቪዲዮ ላንች የመጀመሪያ ጊዜ ነው ለፐብሊክ የምናቀርበውና I think it's a great honor በዚህ አጋጣሚ ኢትዮ ፊደልን ለማመሰግን ወዳለሁ እሱ ነው አብሮ ከኛ ጋር ተባብሮ የሰራውና I'll just lead you to that